The shattered crown. The great throne of the alien empire stood in silence, its golden frame glowing under the cold light of the palace. Yet behind the walls, whispers spread like fire. The princess, long believed to be infertile, had vanished. Years ago, her absence had been explained with lies, diplomatic journeys, sacred retreats, false illness. But now her sudden return broke all illusions. She had come back with a child in her arms. The court was stunned. The child's eyes were not the same as the royal bloodline. They carried a strange fire, a brightness no alien had ever seen. Some claimed it was dangerous. Others whispered it was divine. But one truth was impossible to hide. The child was not purely alien. The emperor, old and weary, sat upon the throne and trembled with rage. His voice shook the chamber as he demanded answers. The princess stood tall, her golden robes flowing, her chin raised in defiance. She had once been quiet, obedient, and fragile in the eyes of the council, but now her presence carried strength. "Where has this child come from?" The emperor thundered. His words echoed across the marble walls. "How can you claim blood of the throne when you were declared barren?" The nobles exchanged sharp glances. Some smirked, some clenched their jaws, some saw weakness in the throne, and others saw opportunity. The princess did not bow. She placed the child gently on the floor beside her and answered with calm but firm words, "The blood of this heir is my blood, my father, and it carries more than you can imagine." Her voice carried through the court like a blade, but it only stirred more questions. Rumors had lived in the shadows for years, that she had once been saved by a strange being, a human. The empire considered humans primitive wanderers, too reckless, too emotional. Yet even in alien records, there were whispers of their resilience, their ability to adapt, and their endless defiance against impossible odds. Could it be true? Had the princess broken the sacred code and bonded with one of them? The child looked up at the emperor with wide, unafraid eyes. He was too young to speak, but there was something unsettling in his gaze. It was not arrogance, nor fear, but a steady calm, as if the boy already understood the weight of the throne. The emperor turned pale. His heart raced, for deep within he recognized something he dared not speak aloud. He saw a spark of humanity, and it terrified him. Counselors erupted into argument. Some shouted for the child's execution, declaring it an insult to their bloodline. Others demanded the princess be locked away for treason. A few, very few, leaned forward with fascination, whispering of new strength, of new possibility. "The throne trembles," one old noble muttered under his breath. "For if this child lives, everything we know will change." The princess held her son close again. Her eyes did not break from the emperor's. She remembered the moment her life had been saved years ago, when an assassin's blade had nearly ended her in the shadows of the royal gardens. A man, not alien, but human, had stepped between death and destiny. His blood spilled for her that night, and in the fire of battle, something unthinkable was born. She had carried that secret through silence, through exile, through years of fear. And now she brought the proof into the very heart of the empire. The emperor clenched the arms of his throne. His hands shook with rage and fear. He saw rebellion in the eyes of his council, division in the heart of his empire, and the shadow of war on the horizon. For if humans could touch the throne through blood, then the throne was no longer theirs alone. The chamber's doors burst open. A messenger ran in, his armor scratched, his breathing heavy. He bowed low and shouted, "My emperor, the outer colonies have heard the news. They question your rule. They say the throne no longer holds pure blood. Already, whispers of rebellion rise." The hall fell silent. The emperor's rage turned to dread. The nobles who moments ago shouted for the child's death now grew quiet. Calculating, they knew a storm was coming. The princess looked around the hall. She saw fear, greed, and hatred in the eyes of her people. But she also saw something else. Cracks. Cracks in the empire's pride. Cracks where truth could slip through. The child pressed his small hand against her robes. His innocent gaze lifted again toward the throne. In that moment, the princess felt a certainty. This child was not a curse, but a key to something greater than thrones and crowns. The emperor, shaking, rose slowly from his seat. His voice dropped low, but it carried like thunder. If this is true, then the empire stands on the edge of ruin. The child is a threat to everything we have built, and if he lives, the throne will fall. But the princess did not flinch. Her reply came steady, calm, and unshaken. No, father, the throne will not fall. It will rise higher than you ever dreamed. The silence that followed was heavier than any battle cry. The throne, once unshakable, now trembled under the weight of a single truth. The impossible had happened. An heir of two worlds stood before them, and across the galaxy, enemies and allies alike would soon learn of it. The forbidden heir. The council chamber did not rest after the princess's return. Instead, it became a storm filled with anger, fear, and whispers that no one dared to say aloud. The heir stood at the center of it all, a small child who did not cry or hide. His eyes glowed with an unsettling calm, and that calm shook the empire more than screams of war ever could. The emperor retreated to his private chamber. His advisors followed him like shadows, whispering their plans. Some urged him to kill the child quickly before rebellion spread. Others warned that such an act would only make martyrs. The throne was trapped, no path free from danger. The princess held her son close in her own quarters. She whispered to him, her voice soft but firm. You are more than their fear. You are proof that destiny is stronger than their lies. Her son looked at her with wide eyes, too young to speak. Yet there was an understanding in his gaze that no child should have. The empire had always believed the princess to be barren. That lie had been convenient, a way to remove her from the line of succession without bloodshed. Her brothers had been groomed for power, while she was left in silence. But now, with one child, she had destroyed their plans. The court spread rumors faster than fire. Some called the heir cursed, a child of broken laws. Others said he was chosen, born to unite bloodlines and give the empire a new path. The streets of the capital echoed with the gossip. Citizens argued in markets and temples. Fear was growing, but so was curiosity. At night, the emperor called a secret council. They sat around a long table, their faces lit by the pale glow of crystal lamps. One spoke first. If we let the child live, rebellion will grow. If we kill him, it may already be too late. Another hissed. The people do not trust us anymore, they will turn to her. A third leaned forward. But if we can control the boy, raise him as our tool, he may save the throne. The emperor listened but said nothing. His mind returned again and again to the boy's eyes. That calm, unbroken gaze haunted him. He had seen fear in kings, rage in warlords, but never that kind of steady strength in one so small. It frightened him more than any army. Meanwhile, far from the palace, whispers spread to the border worlds. Colonies where humans had once fought beside aliens in wars long forgotten began to stir. They heard the tale of the forbidden heir and saw hope. For if the child lived, then humans, too, had a claim on the throne. The princess knew the danger. She was watched day and night by guards, her every move tracked. Yet she did not bow to fear. She trained her son quietly, not with weapons, but with words. She told him stories of his father, the human who had stood unshaken against blades and fire. She told him of honor, of courage, of kindness that grew even in the darkest places. The boy listened carefully, as if every word was a seed planted in his heart. At times he would ask, "Mother, why do they fear me?" She would answer, "Because they see a future they cannot control." But control was exactly what the council desired. Weeks passed, and a secret plan formed. A group of nobles decided they would take the boy, raise him in their image, and claim him as their puppet. If the princess resisted, she would be silenced. One evening, shadows moved through the palace. A group of masked assassins crept toward the princess's chamber. Their blades were sharp, their orders clear. The child must vanish. The princess, sensing danger, held her son tight. She whispered, "Do not fear, they will not take you from me." The doors burst open, steel clashed in the dark. The assassins lunged, but before they could strike, a hidden guard revealed himself. He fought with fury, his blade cutting through the silence. The assassins fell, but one escaped, fleeing into the night with blood on his hands. The princess rushed to her son, who had not cried once. His small hands clutched her robes, his eyes steady. She felt her, heartbreak and heal at the same time. "You are stronger than I ever knew," she whispered. "And they will learn it too." The emperor heard of the failed attempt. His fury burned through the palace. He demanded answers, but none came. The council grew restless. Some whispered of war, some of exile, some of surrender. But in secret corners of the empire, songs began to spread. Songs of a forbidden heir who carried both alien blood and human fire. Songs of a throne that trembled, not from weakness, but from change. The princess knew the war had already begun, not with armies, but with whispers. Every eye in the empire turned toward her son. He was no longer just a child. He was a symbol, a question, and perhaps an answer. The throne trembled. The empire, divided and deep within the palace, the air of two worlds grew stronger each day. Whispers of rebellion. The empire no longer felt whole. Streets that once echoed with pride and loyalty now filled with hushed voices. Merchants paused in the middle of trade to argue about the child. Soldiers whispered around campfires. Priests in the temples debated whether the heir was a curse or a blessing. The throne still stood, but cracks spread like unseen roots beneath the stone. In hidden corners of the capital, groups gathered in secret. Some swore loyalty to the princess, seeing her son as a new dawn. Others plotted rebellion, demanding that the empire cut away this stain of human blood. Every whisper carried danger, and every whisper added fuel to the fire. The emperor tried to hold his council together, but his own nobles began to fracture. Some of the younger ones argued that the boy could unite the empire. They had seen the way his calm gaze unsettled warriors, yet gave hope to the poor. But the older ones clung to tradition, their voices harsh and cruel. "No throne can stand. With impure blood," they declared. "If we allow this, our empire dies." The princess watched it all from her chambers. Her son sat beside her, his eyes always watching, always listening. He seemed too quiet, too aware for his age. Sometimes, he would repeat words he heard from the council guards. His memory was sharp, sharper than any ordinary child. The princess realized with unease that his human heritage had given him more than just strength. It had given him a mind that learned faster than theirs. The people outside began to notice too. In markets, stories grew wild. Some said the child could walk through fire unharmed. Others said his voice could calm wild beasts. A few whispered he had the gift of seeing the future. None of these tales were true, yet all of them made him larger than life. Rebellion sparked in the outer colonies first. These were places where humans had once fought beside aliens, places where the blood of war still lingered. There, the news of the child spread not as fear but as hope. The rebels painted symbols of stars and crowns on their banners. They shouted in the streets, "An heir of two worlds will bring freedom." The emperor sent soldiers to crush them. But something strange happened. The soldiers hesitated. Some secretly agreed with the rebels. Some laid down their weapons. Others simply fled, afraid not of the rebels but of the idea that the throne itself no longer stood unchallenged. In the palace, the council grew desperate. They argued day after day. One voice called for exile of the princess and her son. Another demanded their execution. Yet another suggested using the boy as a weapon against the rebels. Each idea only deepened the divisions. The emperor sat in silence through most of it, his face pale, his eyes heavy. He had ruled for decades with strength, but now his own hands trembled. The boy's presence haunted him. The whispers of rebellion were louder in his mind than the voices of his council. One night, the princess awoke to a strange sound. She found her son standing by the window, looking out at the stars. His small voice broke the silence. "They fight because of me, don't they?" She froze. He was too young to understand, yet somehow he did. She knelt beside him, placing her hands on his shoulders. "They fight because they fear what they cannot control," she whispered. "But you are not fear. You are hope." Child turned his gaze back to the stars. His eyes seemed older than his years. He whispered almost to himself, "Then I will not let them take it from me." The next morning, the palace heard of another attempt on the child's life. Assassins had been caught in the lower halls, blades dripping with poison. This time they were not outsiders. They were soldiers sworn to the Empire. The council chamber erupted. Accusations flew. Some shouted that the Emperor himself had given the order. Others demanded loyalty oaths be sworn anew. The throne trembled under its own weight. But beyond the palace, rebellion no longer whispered, it shouted. Whole colonies declared themselves free. They raised banners of stars and fire. They called the boy the Starborn Heir, claiming he was the bridge between two worlds. And for the first time in centuries, the Empire began to lose control. The princess stood before her son. She knew the Empire was breaking. She knew the throne could no longer silence the truth. "They will come for us again," she said quietly. "But this time you will not hide. You will stand. Because you are not just my son. You are theirs, too." The boy nodded, his eyes calm as always. He did not tremble. He did not cry. He simply stood and held her hand. And in that moment, the princess felt the power of destiny. The whispers of rebellion had become the roar of change. And deep within the palace, the emperor knew the truth he had tried to deny. The heir was not a passing threat. The heir was the future. The return of the human. The empire shook under rebellion. The council was broken into pieces. The emperor grew weaker by the day, and the princess held her son close as the storm outside grew louder. Yet no one in the palace was prepared for the return of the man they thought dead. It began with a whisper. At the outer gates, a ragged figure wrapped in a torn cloak entered the city. His steps were heavy but sure. His body bore scars of fire and blade. Soldiers tried to stop him, but his eyes froze them in place. He carried no weapon, yet he walked like a warrior who had survived too many battles. The guards soon reported his presence. His name carried like lightning through the court. "A human," they whispered. "The same human who vanished years ago." The princess was in her chambers when the news reached her. For a moment she could not breathe. Her heart remembered the night when he had saved her life. She remembered the warmth of his blood as he fell before her. She had believed he died in that moment. Yet now he had returned. The council did not celebrate. They trembled. If the heir was truly born of this man, then all their fears were confirmed. They sent soldiers to seize him, but the human did not resist. He allowed them to bind his hands. His gaze remained calm as though he had expected this. They dragged him before the emperor, the chamber filled with nobles eager to see the truth with their own eyes. The human knelt, though not in weakness but in control. His voice was low, steady, and unshaken. "I did not come for your throne, I came for my son." The hall erupted in chaos. The words struck like fire. The councillors shouted. Some demanded his execution. Others demanded the boy be taken away. The emperor's face turned pale. He stared at the human, and in that gaze he saw the shadow of fear. The princess stepped forward. She placed her hand on the boy's shoulder and said, "This is his father." Her voice rang out, filled with defiance and pride. The chamber fell into stunned silence. The emperor rose slowly from his throne. His hands shook. His voice cracked with rage. "You dare bring this corruption into my court? You dare admit that a human has touched our blood?" The human did not bow. He lifted his eyes and met the emperor's fury. "Your throne trembles because you fear change. But I am not your enemy. I am the man who saved your daughter, and I am the man who will protect my child." Some nobles gasped at his courage. Others hissed in disgust, but none could deny his strength. He did not tremble in the face of their power. He stood like stone, unyielding. The emperor ordered his imprisonment. Chains of steel and crystal bound his hands and feet. They locked him in the dungeons below. Yet even there he did not break. The guards who watched him whispered that his eyes glowed with fire. They began to fear him, not for his strength, but for the certainty in his gaze. The princess visited him in secret. She slipped past guards and shadows until she stood before him. For a moment words failed her, tears touched her eyes. "I thought you were gone," she whispered. The human smiled faintly, though his body was scarred and weak. "I promised you I would return," he said. "I do not break promises." She told him of their son, of the rebellion, of the throne trembling on the edge of ruin. His eyes lit with quiet pride when he heard, "He will be stronger than both of us," he said softly, "because he carries more than blood. He carries hope." But danger circled tighter with each passing day. The council feared the human's presence. They knew that if word spread beyond the palace, the rebels would rally with new strength. They plotted to end his life before the galaxy could learn. He still lived, yet fate was not with them. A messenger from the border colonies arrived with grim news. Entire fleets were moving toward the capital. Rival empires saw weakness and prepared to strike. The throne could no longer hide behind walls. War had come. The emperor, desperate, summoned the council once more. His voice was heavy. "We face ruin. If we kill the child, the rebels will rise. If we kill the human, we invite war. What choice is left to us?" The council did not answer. They looked at one another, but none spoke. For the first time in centuries, the throne had no clear path. The princess stood tall in the silence. Her voice carried across the chamber. "The choice is not yours anymore. The galaxy will decide. The heir will decide." The emperor's face darkened. He saw his power slipping from his hands, and as he looked at the human in chains, he knew that the true threat was not rebellion, not war, but the bond between human and alien that no throne could undo. The storm had arrived, and the throne would never be the same. War drums in the empire. The sound of unrest grew louder across the empire. The palace no longer felt like the heart of power, but like a cage surrounded by enemies. Messengers arrived each day carrying news that shook the council. Colonies refused to send taxes, fleets refused to answer the emperor's call, and distant worlds declared they would no longer kneel to the throne. The forbidden heir had become a symbol, his name whispered in markets, painted on walls, and sung in secret gatherings. Rebels carried banners marked with stars and fire, declaring that the child would unite the galaxy. The emperor ordered the destruction of these symbols. But every time one was burned, 10 more appeared. The people no longer feared the throne. They feared what the throne might do to silence hope. The human father still sat in chains, but even in the dungeons his presence was felt. Guards who watched him left with uneasy hearts. Some even whispered they saw strength in him that no chains could hold. The more the council tried to hide his existence, the more the truth slipped into the streets. Soon everyone knew. The father of the heir was alive. The princess refused to bow. She carried herself with the pride of a queen, walking the halls with her son at her side. The boy never cried, never stumbled. His calm eyes unsettled the nobles and inspired the servants. Rumors grew wild. Some said he could already command soldiers with a glance. Others swore he dreamed. Of battles before they happened, none knew the truth, but all believed something greater was unfolding. The emperor called his generals to prepare for war. Rival empires had begun to move their fleets. Sensing weakness, the capital world prepared defenses. Great warships lined the skies. Cannons charged and soldiers marched in endless rows. But no matter how many ships or soldiers the emperor gathered, fear remained. Because this war was not only against enemies outside, it was also against rebellion within. The council argued night after night. Some claimed the only path was to kill the human and his son, ending the threat before it grew. Others warned that doing so would spark flames. Too great to control, voices rose, threats were spoken, and loyalty oaths shattered like glass. The empire was tearing itself apart. The princess stayed silent in those meetings, but her silence was not weakness. She listened, she watched, and she learned who among them desired the throne more than peace. Her son sat quietly beside her. His small hand resting on hers. Every time she looked into his eyes, she saw not fear but certainty. It gave her strength to endure. In the hidden barracks beneath the palace, loyalists trained in secret. These were men and women who still believed in honor, not politics. The human, though still chained, was allowed to speak to them. His voice carried lessons of resilience. He taught them human tactics, unpredictable, sharp, and full of risk. You do not win by being stronger, he told them. You win by being braver when others lose hope. His words spread like fire through the shadows. Meanwhile, the streets of the capital grew restless. Protests filled the plazas. Soldiers clashed with citizens. Blood was spilled in alleys where voices demanded justice. The empire could no longer hide its weakness. War drums beat not only in the skies but also in the hearts of its people. The Wei Emperor sat alone in his chambers at night, staring at the crown resting on the table. It no longer looked like a symbol of power but of burden. He had ruled for decades, but never had he seen the empire so fragile. The heir haunted him, not because of what the child was, but because of what he represented. Change, a future the emperor could not control. One evening, a messenger burst into the council chamber, his armor cracked, his face pale with fear. "My emperor," he shouted, "the fleets of the Crimson Worlds approach. They have joined with rebel colonies. They march under the banner of the Starborn." "Heir?" The chamber erupted into chaos. Some nobles cried for surrender. Others demanded immediate war. The emperor pounded his fist on the throne. "We will not kneel to lies," he roared. But even his own generals lowered their eyes, unsure. If they still believed, the princess stood then, her son at her side. Her voice rose above the noise, clear and steady. "You call him a lie," she said, "but the galaxy calls him hope, and hope cannot be killed." Her words silenced the hall. Some nobles stared, at her with hate, others with awe. But none could deny the truth of what she spoke. Outside, the skies of the capital burned with the light of warships arriving. Thousands of vessels filled the stars, their weapons glowing. The drums of war echoed not only through the empire but through every heart that looked up at the heavens. The throne trembled. The emperor knew the battle was no longer about power or territory. It was about survival. And survival now rested in the hands of a child who was both alien and human. Blood and fire. The drums of war no longer echoed only in whispers. They thundered across the galaxy, the skies above the capital filled with fire as fleets closed in. Blazing engines streaked through the void, rival banners shining against the stars. The empire was surrounded, and the throne trembled more than ever before. Inside the palace, chaos ruled. Nobles shouted in fear, generals barked orders, servants fled through corridors. The emperor, once unshakable, now clung to his throne with shaking hands. His voice cracked as he demanded loyalty, but loyalty had already begun to vanish. The princess stood tall in the council chamber, her son at her side. His small frame seemed fragile, yet his calm gaze silenced voices stronger than armies. The nobles glared at him, some with hate, others with hidden awe. It was as if his presence alone burned away lies. The human remained in chains in the dungeons, but his voice traveled through the palace. His guards had begun to listen. Soldiers who once despised him now carried his words like torches in the dark. He told them of courage, of battles fought when defeat seemed certain. "Fire may consume you," he said, "but it also makes you stronger." The words spread, and soon even the emperor's soldiers whispered them. The first strikes came swiftly. Enemy fleets fired upon the capital's defenses. Explosions lit the skies like falling stars. Cities trembled under the roar of war. Towers shook, and walls crumbled. Panic spread through the streets as civilians ran for shelter. Yet even in that chaos, voices rose chanting for the Starborn. "Heir." The emperor ordered the armies to hold, but divisions tore them apart. Some soldiers fought with loyalty to the crown, others hesitated, unwilling to kill rebels who shouted the heir's name. The empire's once mighty unity shattered in the smoke of war. The princess moved her son into the hidden war chambers. Safe walls of crystal and steel surrounded them. But even there she felt the fire of rebellion burn closer. She placed her hands on her son's shoulders. "The galaxy burns," she whispered, "but we will not fall." Her son's eyes shone, steady and calm. "Then I will stand with them," he said softly. "I will not hide." That night, the palace itself became a battlefield. Rebels had slipped through secret passages, guided by traitors within the court. Flames licked the golden walls. Screams echoed through the corridors. Steel clashed in the very heart of the throne. The princess drew a blade herself. She had never been trained for war, but desperation gave her strength. She fought beside her guards, protecting her son from every strike. Her robes turned dark with blood, yet she never faltered. The human, still bound in chains, heard the clash of war above. His heart roared with fury. With one great effort, he tore against his bonds. Steel cracked, his wrists bled, and at last the chains broke. He rose from the darkness, a warrior reborn. The guards who had once imprisoned him now followed. They had seen enough to know where true strength lay. Together, they stormed through the palace, cutting down enemies and traitors alike. Flames lit their path, smoke filled the halls. The human moved like a storm, each strike precise, each step unstoppable. His only goal was clear: to reach his son. In the throne room, betrayal revealed itself. The emperor's own counselors turned their blades upon him. They had chosen to sell the empire to rival lords in exchange for power. The emperor fought back, his old hands shaking but unbroken. Yet age and fear weighed him down. His crown slipped, his throne stained with blood. The princess arrived with her son just as the traitors closed in. She stood between her father and the blades. The boy's calm gaze froze the traitors in their tracks. For a heartbeat, none moved. Then the doors burst open, and the human entered. Like fire, his roar shook the chamber. His blade cut through betrayal. One by one, the traitors fell. Their blood painted the stones. The emperor, gravely wounded, slumped against his throne, his eyes locked upon the boy. He coughed, his voice weak. This child is the end of the throne. But the boy stepped forward. His small hand touched the emperor's arm. His calm voice spoke words far older than his years. No, I am not the end. I am the beginning. The hall fell silent. Even the fires seemed to dim. The emperor stared into the boy's eyes and saw not destruction, but something he had never understood. Unity. He took his last breath with that vision. The crown slipped from his head, and the throne was left empty. Outside, the war raged on, skies full of ships, ground full of fire, but in the palace a new truth had been born. The forbidden heir was no longer just a child. He was the center of every hope and every fear. Blood covered the palace floor. Flames painted the walls. But in that storm of fire, a single truth stood unbroken. The future now belonged to the heir of two worlds. The heir of two worlds. The throne room smelled of blood and smoke. The crown lay broken at the base of the golden seat. The emperor was gone. The council lay in ruin, and the palace burned with the echoes of betrayal. Yet in that fire, a new figure stood. Not a king, not a queen, but a child whose blood carried two worlds. The forbidden heir looked at the empty throne. His calm gaze reflected the flames. He did not smile, he did not cry. He only stood in silence, as if he understood that history itself had changed. His mother, the princess, placed her hand gently on his shoulder, her voice soft but firm. The throne is yours now, not as a weapon, not as a prize, but as a burden of hope. The human father, scarred and weary, stood beside them. His chains were broken, his body marked by battle, yet his spirit burned brighter than ever. He looked at his son with pride. You are proof that worlds can meet, that fire and stone can create something greater, he whispered. The boy only nodded, calm as always. His silence spoke louder than any word. Outside the palace, war still raged. Rival fleets filled the skies, cannons thundered, and soldiers clashed in the streets. But word spread faster than fire. The emperor was dead. The throne was empty, and the heir had survived. Rebels and loyalists alike turned their eyes toward the palace, waiting, wondering. The nobles who had survived gathered in fear. They knelt before the child, their voices trembling. Some did so out of respect, others out of desperation. They saw no choice but to accept what had been born in blood and fire. The heir of two worlds, they whispered. The starborn heir. The boy stepped forward, He climbed the steps of the throne. His small hand brushed against the broken crown. He did not place it on his head. Instead, he lifted it high so all could see. His young voice echoed across the chamber, clear and steady. This crown will no longer divide. It will unite. The words carried beyond the walls. Soldiers outside lowered their weapons. Rebels paused in the middle of their charge. Even enemy fleets hovering in the skies hesitated as the message spread. A child now spoke with the voice of a king, and his words were stronger than any weapon. The princess stood beside her son, her eyes filled with tears she did not shed. She had fought, suffered, and bled for this moment. The human father stood. On the other side, his body a wall of strength and loyalty. Together they formed something the Empire had never seen before. A family that bridged two worlds, but not all accepted so easily. In the shadows of the council chamber, bitter voices hissed, "He is a danger. He will end us." They plotted in silence, waiting for another chance. The boy seemed to sense it. His calm gaze turned toward them. And for the first time, he spoke words that made even his enemies tremble. "You cannot end what has already begun." Beyond the capital, the galaxy stirred. On distant colonies, humans heard the news and raised their banners. They no longer stood as outsiders. They now carried pride, for one of their own blood sat upon the alien throne. Among alien worlds, fear and wonder mixed. Some swore loyalty, others prepared for war. The boy's presence grew like a storm, not through force but through belief. Wherever his name was spoken, people felt courage. Wherever his gaze fell, men who once wanted to fight laid down their arms. He was too young to command, yet he commanded without trying. The throne that had once trembled with fear now trembled with change. It was no longer the empire of one world, it was the empire of two, and its future was uncertain. But in that uncertainty, there was hope. The human father trained soldiers in new ways, teaching them not just to fight but to survive. He showed them how humans had lived through impossible battles. He told them, "War is not won by strength alone. It is won by those who refuse to surrender." His words spread, and soon alien soldiers began to follow him as if he were a general. 3. Princess rebuilt the council, filling it not with greedy nobles but with voices from across the empire, voices of the poor, the rebels, and even humans who had once been ignored. She said, "If the throne is to survive, it must belong to everyone, not just the blood of the crown." Her vision shook the old order, but it planted seeds of something greater. The child sat upon the throne at last, not with a crown of gold, but with a light of destiny. His calm eyes looked beyond the walls, beyond the stars. He did not see borders. He saw unity. His voice carried once more. "I am not just heir to a throne. I am heir to hope." The council bowed. The palace bowed. And even the galaxy paused. For in that moment the impossible had become real. The alien throne no longer trembled in fear. It trembled in awe. For the heir of two worlds now ruled, and across the stars whispers began anew. If a child of human and alien blood can rule, then perhaps peace is not a dream. Perhaps it is destiny. The story of the empire had ended in blood and fire, but the story of the heir had only just begun.